Today we're starting with anxiety, and so we would just like to talk to you about what that looks like in our school, how that impacts our students, and a little more for you guys.
Yeah. So, Jill, let's just start off by talking about the symptoms of anxiety that we see in our kiddos here at school.
Well, we can really see a lot of different presentations of anxiety in our kids here. Physiologically, you might see kids with excessive stomach aches, headaches, trouble sleeping at night, so they might be real tired in your classroom, extra bathroom breaks. Internally, this is a lot of negative thoughts that are going on in your students. They might be thinking about bad thoughts about themselves, replaying an event that happened in the past over and over, or something that they are concerned will happen in the future.
So maybe like something that happened at home with a parent. They're worried about leaving their parent at home, what might happen while they're at school, things like
Exactly. And almost always this kid is going to have low self-esteem. There's also typically a constant concern about what ifs. That's another way you might see anxiety in your classroom.
What if I don't do well? What if I, whatever,
Lots of questions. And usually without a reasonable answer. It's usually some kind of illogical thought process.
And almost like if you give an answer, there's always another what if to go with it.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Right. It's never ending. In the brain, we know that whenever a child is anxious, you get that fight, flight, or freeze response. And so for anxiety, it's going to be the flight or the freeze response. And usually the child's fear can be so strong that they might avoid certain activities, or it looks like they might lack motivation. And in some cases, it can be really hard for us as well as teachers to distinguish between ADHD and anxiety, because kiddos that fidget and pace can have anxiety. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we just immediately label that as ADHD, but it's not always the case.
True, very true.
So Kelly, I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more about how anxiety presents itself at school.
Well, Jill, you mentioned, that freeze or flight, and I think that in an uncomfortable situation, right, that sometimes our kiddos feel at school, that's when we see them try to, what we call elope, leave the classroom. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, we usually want to, ask them what's wrong, or, we're trying to comfort them, and the extra attention sometimes really escalates them, unbeknownst to us, mm-hmm. And so they try to leave the room, or they may withdraw, and they're trying to self-regulate. They're trying to figure out what to do with the feelings that they're having, but they don't really know yet because they're only like 7, 8, and 9 years old. And so we see them do what we would call shutting down, mm-hmm. But it's really a withdrawal because of their overwhelming feelings. In the classroom, I think that you're going to see students who might have a hard time concentrating. They might struggle with following directions or completing assignments, which kind of goes again with that why it might look like ADHD or ADD. And they're so worried about whether or not what they do is going to be correct that it takes them super long to finish an assignment. Mm-hmm. What we would have called perfectionism, right? Yes. Is really anxiety. They're trying to get it so perfect. That their worrying might even cause them to lose their thoughts, so they don't want to volunteer to answer questions in class, so then they look like they're not participating like they should be. Mm-hmm. They also might refuse to work in groups because they don't really want to interact socially with others.
Yes, and you know what? That makes me really curious about lunch and recess. How does that impact them?
Totally. Because, at lunch, you're talking about an overwhelming group of people, right? And so they don't, I've had kids who threw up when they went to lunch a lot because just the experience of being in the cafeteria, which is one reason why that whole quiet while we eat is such a great thing that we started to do. But also, just being socially isolated sometimes at recess, these kids can sometimes seem irritable or unapproachable to other kids, and so they tend to maybe be loners or just have that one good friend that they play with because they...
Okay, that makes sense to me. And what about elective?
So at elective, again, that's kind of like recess and cafeteria. That's somewhat of an unstructured time for them. And so if they, for example, PE, you know, where there's a large group of kids and balls that are flying everywhere, you know, that may be a struggle for them. Or if they're the kind of kid, as you mentioned, most of them tend to have struggle with self-esteem. So if I feel like I can't do art, I might hate to go to art or not like to go to elective. Yeah, I'm avoiding those things. So with all the things that we're seeing with our kids in the classroom and around school, what do you think that our teachers can do to support those students?
Well, I've seen a lot of positive things in our classrooms, and if you have a kiddo in your class who's experiencing anxiety, the first most basic thing you can start by doing is just acknowledging their feeling, and that might be just a statement like, this is a little scary for you right now, or I know that you feel unsure. It's very natural for us to want to question and find out why, and ask what's going on, but really sometimes those questions can put our kids into stress. And so we want to diffuse that as much as possible. Some things that you can do for your whole group can be leading your class in positive affirmations, or just positive statements like, I can do this, it's okay to ask for help, I'm a hard worker. Any of those.
Even I need some of that. Yeah, that's right. Yes. Even I need those sometimes. Absolutely.
Yes, for sure. That can help. And having almost like a class relaxation time, maybe like a yoga break or some kind of focus on mindfulness just for a few minutes, can be really good for somebody who has a lot of nervous energy, like those people that fidget or pace. That's a good way for them to let that out safely. And then reinforcing the policies with 30-minute homework policy, having a flexible deadline for an assignment can be really reassuring for your anxious kids. Breaking it down, giving very simple instructions step by step, can make a difference as well for somebody who's having difficulty concentrating. For those that get anxious about transitions, making sure that you do frequent reminders. Transitions are coming up, like even a 5, 3, and 1 minute warning. It seems excessive, but it can really make a difference. And you might just even, touch the desk of the student in particular, just to let them know. Using a visual schedule for that type of student can make a big difference. Like a little strip
on the desk or something like that. I know some kiddos really do benefit from having that. We also mentioned, when you were talking about, I know I mentioned directions, but you were talking about instructions, highlighting the directions on the test. That is really awesome. And I know a lot of our teachers do use that as a way to help kids remember what they're supposed to do next.
When you have that test anxiety, something that can really help is just giving a little extra review time, and that can really bring the stress level down for those kids. Some tangible things that you can use are the privacy shields. I see that happening a lot in classrooms, and that can just be a way for your kids to take a break as well. In the situations where we've got kids who are feeling uncomfortable at lunch, recess, or even at PE or large group assemblies, you might use headphones. And then a lot of teachers use a calm down corner in their classroom, but you can even make a calm down kit for an individual student or students to use and share. And we're going to have some of those resources posted on Blackboard for you so you can see what it would look like to implement that in your classroom.
Yeah, like a calm down kit, like what's included in that, for example. Okay.
Can you tell us now, Kelly, what our teachers can do to help our parents out who are dealing with these kiddos, or some things that they can do to support them?
Absolutely. It's kind of a fine line that we walk, because we don't want to tell parents how to do their job, but sometimes because we spend so much time with them, we are kind of the expert sometimes on what can best help children. So I think it's totally good for us to encourage parents to keep their kids in a routine. Having a predictable daily schedule is really good for all children, but especially a child who has anxiety. And we know that our kids who struggle with some of the issues that we see here at school, like ADHD, anxiety, that those things definitely require an adequate amount of sleep every night. So we definitely want to encourage parents to try to make that happen for them, which means probably putting their portable devices in another room. Quality time, all kids need quality time, but especially for a child who needs the reassurance from that parent, quality time, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes. We know it's not really the quantity, it's really what they're doing. And when your kid knows that they have that one-on-one attention from you, even if it's just for 5 minutes, encourage them to do that while they read maybe a chapter in a book together. We're always trying to get our parents to read with their kids. That would be a great time.
Yes, and it really supports that child's security.
Yeah, absolutely.
Feeling of secureness.
Definitely. And trying to keep the stress or drama down. We have a lot of kids in a lot of different family situations, but trying to shield them from that. You'd be amazed that the stuff our kids know that we feel like they shouldn't know. I know you do too. And also, and Jill, you mentioned this, but explaining the homework policy to parents and making sure that the parent understands that it shouldn't be more than 20 or 30 minutes a night, because, that's, I think the St. Tammany Parish policy says 10 minutes per grade. So, that's really what our kiddos should be doing. And just helping parents do this thing we call life, because they don't come with instructions. So
Nope. And we have just about finished our conversation on anxiety for today. We hope that you do check out those resources that we have posted on Blackboard, and this is just the beginning of a couple more videos to come. Thank you.
Thanks.